The Empire had conquered 17 star systems in less than a century. Their ships moved faster than light itself. Their weapons could melt entire cities in seconds. Their shields could stop any known projectile in the galaxy. When they arrived in Earth's solar system, they expected another easy victory. They expected humans to surrender within days. They were wrong. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He watched the blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. His 4 eyes blinked in amusement. The humans had no faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were primitive. Their ships were slow and weak. This conquest would take perhaps 3 days at most. The fleet numbered 500 warships. Each one was armed with plasma cannons that could fire through mountains. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon, sent the standard surrender message to Earth. He offered them a simple choice: submit and become slaves of the Empire, or face complete destruction. The human response came within hours. A single word appeared on his communication screen. The word was simple. The word was no. Laughed. He had heard this response before from other primitive species. They always said no at first. They always changed their minds after their first city burned. He ordered his fleet to advance toward Earth. The conquest would begin immediately. General Sarah stood in the underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was 52 years old. Her hair was gray and her face was lined with years of service. She had fought in 3 wars on Earth. She had never lost a battle. Now she faced an enemy that could destroy her entire species. She was not afraid. Around her stood the greatest military minds humanity had ever produced. They had studied for months. They had watched how the aliens conquered other worlds. They had found weaknesses that they did not know they had. The aliens were arrogant. They followed the same patterns in every conquest. They expected their technology to win every fight. They had never faced an enemy that thought differently. General pointed at the holographic display showing the alien fleet. She explained her plan to the other commanders. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the only chance humanity had to survive. The commanders listened in silence. When she finished, they all nodded. They understood that victory required sacrifice. They were ready to give everything. The fleet approached Earth. Their sensors showed the human defense fleet ahead. It was pathetically small, only 80 ships against 500. The human vessels were old and slow. Their weapons could barely scratch shields, did not even bother to change formation. He simply ordered his fleet to advance and destroy the humans. The human ships did something unexpected. Instead of retreating or surrendering, they accelerated directly toward the fleet. They came at full speed, spreading out in a wide formation. Found this amusing. The humans were brave but foolish. Their bravery would not save them. The first human ships entered weapons range. The cannons opened fire. Plasma beams cut through space, striking the human vessels. Shields failed instantly. Hull metal melted like ice in a furnace. 20 human ships died in the first minute of battle, but the remaining ships kept coming. Then the explosions began, not in space but inside the ships. Stared at his display in confusion. 3 of his warships were burning. Internal explosions had torn through their engine rooms. He demanded answers from his officers. They had no answers to give. They had never seen this kind of attack before. What they did not understand was simple. The human ships that died in the first wave were not ordinary warships. They were cargo vessels filled with thousands of tiny drones. When the weapons destroyed them, the drones scattered into space. They were too small for sensors to detect. They flew toward the alien ships and attached themselves to the hull. Then they drilled through the metal and crawled inside. The drones were simple machines. They carried no weapons. They carried no explosives. They carried only one thing: a container of liquid oxygen mixed with metal powder. When the container broke, the mixture ignited. Fire spread through the alien ships faster than their crews could react. Watched in horror as more of his ships began to burn. The human tactic was primitive. It should not have worked against technology, but the aliens had never imagined such an attack. Their shields could stop plasma bolts and missiles. They could not stop thousands of tiny machines crawling through gaps in their armor. General watched the battle from her command center. The first phase of her plan had worked. The alien fleet was in chaos. Now came the second phase, the phase that required human courage beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain James Wright sat in the cockpit of his fighter. He was 28 years old. He had been flying since he was 16. He was the best pilot in the human fleet. Behind him flew 3,000 other pilots. They were volunteers. They all knew they might not survive this mission. They flew anyway. The human fighters launched from hidden bases on the moon. They came in fast and low, using the debris from the battle to hide their approach. Their ships were not designed for space combat. They were atmospheric fighters modified with extra fuel tanks and weapons. They were fragile and slow compared to interceptors, but they had one advantage the aliens did not expect. The human pilots were not afraid to die. Pilots fought from a distance. They used their superior technology to destroy enemies without risk. When human fighters began suicide runs against their ships, they did not know how to respond. A human pilot would fly directly into an engine exhaust port and detonate his entire fuel supply. Another would crash into a weapons array, destroying it completely. They had no defense against enemies who valued victory more than their own lives. Captain Wright led his squadron toward the Eternal Dominion. The flagship was the key to victory. If they could destroy, the alien fleet would fall into confusion. Wright knew the attack would cost many lives. He led the charge anyway. Plasma fire filled the space around his fighter. Ships exploded on every side. Wright dodged and weaved through the deadly beams. He saw his wingman die in a flash of fire. He kept flying. He saw half his squadron vanish in explosions. He kept flying. Nothing would stop him from reaching his target. The Eternal Dominion loomed ahead. It was massive, bigger than any ship Wright had ever seen. Its weapons turned toward his approaching squadron. Wright spoke a final message into his radio. He told his family he loved them. Then he pushed his throttle to maximum. Admiral watched the human fighters approaching. He felt something he had never felt before: fear. These humans were not fighting like any enemy he had faced. They were not trying to survive. They were trying to win at any cost. His people had forgotten what such determination looked like. They had conquered too easily for too long. A human fighter crashed into the bridge shield generator. The explosion knocked from his feet. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. More impacts followed. Human pilots were dying by the hundreds, but each death weakened his ship further. The commander realized that his technology meant nothing against enemies who would sacrifice everything. Captain Wright reached the flagship. His fighter was damaged. His weapons were empty. He had only one thing left to give. He aimed his ship at the main engine array and prepared to ram it at full speed. In that moment he felt no fear. He felt only pride, pride in his species, pride in his courage, pride in humanity. The impact destroyed the Eternal Dominion's main engines. The explosion killed Captain Wright instantly. It also killed Admiral and most of his command staff. The flagship began to drift, powerless and burning. General received the report of the flagship's destruction. She allowed herself one moment of grief for the brave pilots who had given their lives. Then she gave the order for the third phase of her plan. Human submarines had been hiding in the asteroid belt for weeks. They were nuclear missile submarines converted for space warfare. Their missiles were crude compared to weapons, but there were thousands of them. And the fleet was now in chaos, their command structure destroyed, their ships damaged and confused. The missiles launched in waves. They shot down many of them, but they could not stop them all. Nuclear explosions bloomed across the alien fleet. Ships that had conquered 17 star systems died one after another. The superior technology of the could not save them from human determination and sacrifice. The battle lasted 12 hours. When it ended, 300 ships had been destroyed. The survivors fled back to their home system, broken and terrified. They had come expecting easy conquest. They left having learned a lesson they would never forget. General stood before the United Nations Assembly 1 week later. Behind her was a display showing the losses from the battle. Humanity had lost 2,000 ships and 50,000 brave soldiers. The cost had been terrible, but they had survived. They had won. The general spoke to the assembly and to the watching billions across Earth. She told them that this victory was not about technology or weapons. It was about the human spirit. It was about courage that refused to surrender. It was about sacrifice for something greater than oneself. They had conquered 17 star systems. They had never faced a species willing to die for freedom. The news of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy. Other conquered species heard the story. They heard how primitive humans had defeated the mighty fleet. They heard about pilots who flew into enemy ships without hesitation. They heard about generals who planned battles with genius and creativity. Hope spread like wildfire through the conquered worlds. The Empire never recovered from their defeat at Earth. Rebellions broke out across their territory. Species that had surrendered peacefully now fought with fierce determination. They had learned from humanity that superior technology meant nothing against brave hearts and clever minds. Admiral had been wrong about humans. He thought their primitive weapons made them weak. He thought their slow ships made them easy targets. He did not understand that human strength came from something technology could never measure. It came from courage. It came from sacrifice. It came from the refusal to accept defeat. Humanity built new ships in the years that followed. They expanded into space, meeting other species, forming alliances, building a future among the stars. They never forgot the lessons of that first battle. They taught their children about the brave pilots who died saving Earth. They taught them that no enemy was unbeatable, no matter how powerful they seemed. The universe learned to respect humans, not because of their technology, which remained primitive compared to many species, not because of their numbers, which were small compared to the great empires. The universe respected humans because of their spirit, because when faced with impossible odds, they did not run. They did not surrender. They fought with everything they had, and they won. Superior technology meant nothing against human tactical genius and bravery. They learned this lesson too late. The rest of the galaxy learned it just in time, and humanity took its rightful place among the stars, proud, free, and forever brave.